When you open the news today, or even if you just scroll through social media for like 5 minutes, you
Yep.
get this pervasive, almost suffocating feeling that history is just repeating
Oh,
itself.
absolutely.
We've got all this economic turmoil, social polarization that feels like it's at a breaking point, and just crisis after crisis piling up. It's exhausting.
It really is. And, a lot of people are trying to make sense of it. And that's the core question for our deep dive today, looking at this stack of sources. Is this feeling just random chaos? Or are we maybe following a predictable, even a recurring cycle?
And that's where this framework comes in, right? The Strauss-Howe Generational Theory.
Exactly. It's a framework that provides some pretty alarming clarity on all this.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The basic idea is that history moves in these predictable seasons, all driven by how generations act together. So our mission today is to really get into this idea of the cyclum, that's the grand cycle, and its four turnings, or seasons. And specifically, we need to analyze this, frankly, terrifying claim that we are deep inside the most intense phase, the fourth turning, the Great Crisis.
And we have to connect that rhythm to a parallel cycle that our sources just keep highlighting. It's this roughly 80-year rhythm of massive technological reinvention. Because if the theory holds, we're not just in a generational crisis. We are at the same time entering this incredible technological revolution that will define everything for the next 100 years.
Okay, before we jump into the details, I have to ask. The idea that history is just this repeating cycle, it feels a little too neat, doesn't it? Almost deterministic?
That is the number one critique, and it's the right place to start. Strauss and Howe, the American authors behind this, they looked at centuries of history, and they found these patterns, repeating roughly every 80 to 90 years. They called it a cyculum, basically the length of a long human life.
But it's not a clock.
No, exactly. They insist it is not a fixed clock. It's more like a rhythm of the social mood. The events themselves, they're unpredictable, but our social response to them, that follows a pattern.
And that 80 to 90-year window is key because it gives enough time for 4 different generations to be born, grow up, and then take power. So let's break down the 4 turnings, the 4 seasons.
So we always start with the first turning. It's called the high, or the ascension. This is the period right after a crisis. The social order is being rebuilt. Institutions are incredibly strong.
Everybody trusts the system.
Yes, there's a huge degree of common purpose and, faith and authority.
Yeah.
Think of the 1950s in America, that post-World War II stability. That's a classic high.
Then comes the second turning, the awakening.
Right. And this is where society, usually led by the young generation, starts to push back against that rigid order. It's a time of cultural and spiritual exploration, questioning the establishment.
So the 1960s and 70s, the counterculture movement.
A perfect example. Exactly.
Okay, and then the third, the unraveling, or dissolution. This sounds like where things start to go wrong.
This is where things really start to fracture. Individualism just shoots through the roof. Institutional trust collapses.
So you stop trusting the government, the media.
Your neighbors even. Every problem is framed as an individual one, not a collective one. Our sources point to the period from the mid-'80s right up to the 2008 financial crisis as a textbook unraveling.
Which leads us, tragically, to the fourth turning, the crisis.
The storm time. It's always triggered by some huge, usually unforeseen existential threat.
Like what? A war.
Could be internal turmoil, an economic collapse, or, an external enemy. The old system gets destroyed, or at least fundamentally reconfigured, and huge sacrifices are demanded to forge a new order from the rubble.
And history gives us some brutal examples of this.
Oh, undeniable examples. The American Civil War. It completely redefined the nation and destroyed the old Southern economy. Or, the Great Depression followed immediately by the global threat of World War II. That's another classic fourth turning.
So the big claim is that we are living through that right now.
Yeah.
The 2008 financial crisis was the trigger.
A key trigger, yes.
And that was followed by all the political polarization, the pandemic, geopolitical tensions. The theory sees these as the birth pains of this crisis period.
Precisely. And what's so compelling, maybe a little spooky, is that Strauss and Howe predicted this crisis phase back in the early 1990s. Neil Howe's latest book is literally called The Fourth Turning is Here. And the first chapter, the metaphor he uses is winter is here, a time for collective action and survival.
Okay, so we have the generational cycle, this 80-year sluculum setting the social mood. But now let's bring in that parallel rhythm you mentioned, the technology piece.
Yes, because history suggests that every 80 years or so, we don't just get social turmoil. We get a massive societal reinvention driven by new technology.
The correlation is just too strong to ignore.
It is. After those big fourth turnings, society doesn't just rebuild the same house. It enters this quarter-century boom of incredible technological growth. The crisis forces our hand.
We can really see this if we do those 80-year jumps back in time. So let's start 80 years ago. Post-1945, World War II is over. What's the tech package that redesigns the world?
Well, it was a total explosion of applied science. You've had nuclear energy, right? Moving from bombs to power plants.
A symbol of, like, boundless power.
Boundless potential, exactly. You have the first digital computers, these massive room-sized things, laying the groundwork for the entire digital age. Commercial aviation suddenly makes the world feel smaller.
But the analysis suggests the real shift was more about culture, right? It was things like plastics and highways.
Yes. The mass production of plastics, combined with the interstate highway system, that created modern suburbia, modern consumer culture. It completely redefined mobility and what people expected from daily life.
Okay, now let's jump back another 80 years. We're at 160 years ago, post-1865. The American Civil War is over.
And the second industrial revolution just surges. But this time, it's all about industrial scale.
And steel is the key.
The foundational shift was infrastructure built on cheap, strong steel, the Bessemer process. This new material didn't just make better plows, it allowed for nationwide railway networks to just explode across the continent, knitting together all these little regional economies into one giant market.
And that changes everything about labor.
Everything. You see massive adoption of steam power in farming, in mining. It drove urbanization and the rise of big centralized industry. The whole physical map of the country was rewritten in just a couple of decades.
One more jump. 240 years ago, post-1785, the American Revolution has just ended.
And this one was arguably the most radical redesign of all, because it wasn't just about tech, it was about inventing new institutions.
Right, the technology was there. Mechanical engines, coal power, the beginnings of mass production.
And the development of capitalist finance systems to fund it all. That's a kind of economic technology. But the most important invention of that era was representative democracy itself, this radical idea of individual liberty that required an entirely new legal and political system.
So the old world of kings and inherited power was just systematically dismantled and replaced.
In every crisis, destruction is followed by a period of building a whole new operating system for society, powered by new tech.
Which brings us to today.
Which brings us right to the present. If that cycle holds, we are now entering the next major reboot phase. And the sheer depth of the change that's coming is just astonishing. Our sources are arguing that this current technological wave, the one starting basically now, is set to be deeper, more comprehensive than any of the previous ones.
And the reason for that is the engine driving it all. It's not steam, it's not steel, it's artificial intelligence.
Exactly. I mean, historically, all the big disruptive technologies, steam, electricity, the microchip, they replaced or they amplified physical human labor.
Right, they made us stronger or faster.
AI is different. It's a general-purpose technology that allows machines to do cognitive work, learning, analyzing, making decisions.
This isn't just a better tool, it's something that changes the definition of what work even is.
It alters the fundamental definition of intelligence and knowledge. And that affects everything from law and education to art and warfare. It's like the discovery of electricity. It's not one product, it's the thing that all future products will be built on.
And it's not happening in a vacuum. AI is just the centerpiece of this whole package of tech that's all converging at once.
Absolutely. I mean, just think about the clean energy revolution. Solar, wind, battery tech, we're on the cusp of making fossil fuels obsolete. That alone requires redesigning the entire global energy grid.
And at the same time, you have bioengineering just reaching this incredible level of maturity.
Unprecedented control over life itself. CRISPR gene editing, synthetic biology, maybe even manufacturing human organs on demand. The implications for health and agriculture, they're just staggering.
And you still have these huge potential game changers on the horizon, fusion energy.
Right, which promises limitless, clean power. That could completely rewrite the economics of scarcity.
And then there's the private space race, which is opening up a whole new frontier.
It democratizes access to resources and gives us new options for dealing with future crises.
You know, what really stands out here is the massive gap between this breakneck technological change and the institutions we have to manage it. Our governments were designed for trains and broadcast TV, not for algorithms and gene editing.
And that institutional lag, That is the very essence of the fourth turning's internal turmoil. Our current systems, our governments, our schools, our legal frameworks, they were all built on 20th century assumptions about how the world works.
Centralized control, information scarcity.
Exactly. And now they're just struggling intensely to deal with a 21st century world of decentralization and complexity. And that friction, the old operating system crashing under the weight of the new software, that's what fuels the polarization we see every single day.
Which is why some analysts are calling this period an interregnum, or a digital constitution era.
It's a powerful metaphor. The old world is visibly dying. It can't solve climate change or massive inequality. But the new one, it's not fully formed yet. It's struggling to be born. And the fight to build that new governance structure is the defining struggle of our time.
And that brings us right back to the generations, doesn't it? Because the Strauss-Howe theory argues that history is shaped less by the events themselves.
And more by the collective psychological reaction of the generations who are living through them. They can either accelerate or they can slow down these huge technological shifts.
So let's look at how the different generational archetypes are viewing this current wave of change. Because that gap in perspective is the energy source for the fourth turning.
Okay, so let's start with the baby boomers. The prophet archetype. They grew up in that stable post-WWII high. They were trained to be custodians of a very centralized institutional world. For many of them, this digital shift, this decentralization, it feels like a betrayal.
Like the world they knew and built is just disintegrating.
Right. And so their political action is often framed as a defense of those established values, a resistance to the deep structural changes the new tech demands.
Okay, then you have Gen X, the nomad archetype.
The skeptical, latchkey kids who grow up during the unraveling, seeing institutions fail firsthand. Our sources suggest they see technology with this sort of pragmatic skepticism. It's a tool, sure, but it's also unstable and potentially dangerous.
They're the ones in middle management now, right? Trying to hold the old system together while the crisis rages.
They are the critical managers trying to keep the 20th century systems from completely collapsing.
And next up, millennials, the hero archetype. They came of age during the unraveling 9/11, the 2008 crash, and are now young adults right in the middle of this crisis.
And the theory predicts they will feel compelled to confront these huge problems head-on, just like the GI generation did during World War II. They're driven by this need to rebuild social cohesion, to redefine institutions, and to actually manage the technology that previous generations unleashed but couldn't really control.
And finally, you have Gen Z and Alpha, the artist archetype.
They're growing up entirely digital. They've never known a world without crisis headlines. They're often anxious, but also incredibly adaptable.
For them, AI and digital identity. That's just normal.
Their reality is the digital future we are all moving toward. Their big challenge will be to turn that digital fluency into real-world collective action.
So this massive divergence in worldviews. One generation clinging to the past, another trying to build the future.
That is precisely what creates the societal tension needed for the new system to be forged. The fights aren't just about politics or money. They're rooted in fundamentally different generational experiences of technology and trust.
So this is a really powerful synthesis. We've got the generational rhythm of crisis and the 80-year rhythm of tech reinvention, and they're both converging right now, forcing this huge systemic overhaul. What's the final takeaway we should leave the listener with?
Well, while the Strauss-Howe theory is definitely debated in academic circles, critics say it's too vague or it oversimplifies history, it serves as this incredibly powerful intellectual map for framing the future. It lets us step back and see our current turmoil not as just random noise, but as part of a recurring historical process, one that eventually resolves itself, but through painful reconstruction.
But there's a huge difference this time. Something that sets us apart from the crisis generations of 1780 or 1860 or 1940.
Yes, and it's critical. Unlike past crises, which were driven mainly by clashes of ideology or tradition, we have unprecedented analytical tools. We have massive data sets, we have algorithms, simulations, and AI that can model complex systems.
So for the first time, we could actually make this a conscious reconstruction.
Potentially, yes. Instead of a blind destruction driven by instinct, we could use data and advanced analysis to inform how we rebuild.
So we're compelled, just like those past generations, to build a new system, a new digital constitution. The question for you, the listener, then becomes, are we going to use these incredibly powerful new tools to establish a more just, a more sustainable world? Or will the sheer power of the technology just allow us to repeat the same old mistakes, only faster and with more sophisticated means?
It's a deeper transformation this time because the technology is redefining intelligence itself. The path forward is going to demand a kind of integration of human and artificial capability we just don't fully grasp yet. But, history does give us some hope in its rhythm. Every winter, no matter how harsh it feels, it eventually ends with a spring.